Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Wells and I'm going to present this lightning talk on mixed reality lectures. The best way of explaining what a mixed reality capture lecture looks like is by showing it in action. What you can actually see here is me standing with a VR headset on, being composited using a green screen over the top of a 3D virtual environment. You can see as well that there's some 3D objects not only behind me, but also some 3D objects that are overlaid over the top of what I'm doing in the scene as well. And as I walk around in front of my camera on the green screen, these objects get tracked to my position. Some of you may have actually seen this sort of thing, like on YouTube or gaming videos or that sort of thing. So wearing a VR headset, holding VR controllers, and they're playing a popular game here called Beat Saber. The components that had to come together to make this were, of course, a webcam, shooting me in front of a green screen, and this was composited together with another set of virtual content, which was filmed with a virtual camera. And then there's a little bit of extra technology of how that all gets tracked and matched together. So here's what it sort of looks like. At the start of the lecture, I decided to do a little gimmick here of showing what would normally be the title card for my normal 2D lectures. Showing the chat and the leaderboard, which I've talked about in previous Teaching Matters presentations. But then I come flying through from behind to surprise the students, because I did this as an additional thing here that the students didn't know that they were about to witness a mixed reality lecture. So some of the components here was a very expertly modelled 3D hat with the UTAS logo on it, but also a Discord chat display. So this was actually important that for me, I'm wearing a headset, and so I need to be able to see what they're saying to me, but I can see what they're saying on an object on my hand, and you can see here me looking down at my chat in my hand and reading what's being said here. This was actually a little bit of extra technical feat to get the Discord chat through to my virtual environment in what's called the Unity game engine. A fun little thing that I had in there was, based upon the chat, actually, a couple of things to make there be some audience interaction with this, so that it wasn't just a one-way experience, was that I read the chat, and if there's a special word written by any student, I detect that with my code, and I can make something interesting happen in the scene. If someone writes the word balloon, which is fairly uncommon, if they said that, then a whole heap of balloons would fall down from the sky. Something that was useful for the lecture environment itself was that I could use a virtual laser pointer in the scene to be able to point at things. So this replaced the fact that I couldn't point at things with my mouse like I might be doing right now. I'm able to do this in 3D space. When I'm standing here in VR, I'm looking back at some slides behind me, but as you'll see in a moment, I have slides in front of me as if I was at a real lectern. This particular lecture had a lot of video content, and so I decided to make it just slightly more interesting of where those videos would come from, is that I would drag them from off screen using my hands, and I'd place the video in front of the camera. This is actually probably the most useful aspect of this, because I'm in a virtual environment with virtual content in a 3D game engine. I can pull in any 3D model that you download off the internet or model yourself. And so it took me all of about 5 seconds to download an F1 car model and drag it from the sky and place it in front of the camera. Probably an easier way of visualizing this is if you see me standing here with my black hat in the 3D environment, and that's where my controllers would be. The students see this background and the video that I can drag in, but I can see my slide notes from the PowerPoint, and I can see a copy of the slides in front of me, so I don't have to look back all the time. As I said, this is a virtual environment that I could have done anything with, but I made just a quite simple lecture environment because I just wanted this for the first time. But, I could have simulated having people in the audience in front of me in chairs. I could have had more objects around, like a desk with flowers on it or something like that. Anything that I wanted, really, the sky's the limit. Whatever a game engine can do, and that's quite a bit, I could do in here. What it looks like from an outsider perspective in my lovely office at home, which is clearly a mess, is, as I said, me standing in front of the green screen and my camera is a little bit over here. So just a little bit of background for those who are interested in how this was made. The whole lecture room that I was using there was built in a thing called Unity. And I wrote some additional code. It didn't take very long, but it was still needed to facilitate this. Is that Unity can... I made a thing that could make sure that Unity could read in the content of the PowerPoint slides as pictures, and that my presenter notes would come through as well. And I had a system, a very rudimentary system set up for when to show a particular video for a slide, or when to show a particular 3D object. The hardware that I used was a Quest 2 headset, and the capture was done using a tool called Liv, L-I-V. And I've got a guide here by the channel Nazy, who's an Australian YouTuber, that is pretty comprehensive of how you set it up. So just in terms of reflecting on what was done here, this was a fun gimmick, and it was received well by the students. It was interesting that this felt surprisingly natural while delivering the lecture. Even though I'm entirely immersed in a headset, there was enough audience interaction maintained that it felt like the same as my normal Discord lectures, and it felt similar to standing up and pointing at things like in a real-life lecture. Remember those? And so the 3D objects that I showed there of bringing in the Formula 1 car, while again that was a gimmick, it could be quite interesting you could drag in a 3D object, and using all of the technology of VR there, like I said, you can manipulate those models, you can scale them, you could press buttons on the controller to do a sudden cross-section for, if you're showing an actual Formula 1 car for engineering, or if you're wanting to look inside the human body for biology, you could still manipulate that in real time, live or pre-recorded for a class. And I'd be open to people wanting to try that sort of thing out. Just reach out to me. However, in terms of being able to apply this to a live lectorial content where you may need to set up break rooms or do some kind of administration tasks, it's difficult or doesn't make sense to take off the headset and press the buttons to make up breakout rooms and that sort of thing. So this sort of thing might be more suited to high quality pre-recorded materials, or more engaging like 3D live manipulation of objects. I'll just finish with some gotchas about this. So obviously you saw some of the 3D objects didn't line up to where my head or my hand was perfectly, and it was a constant state of, when preparing for this, setting up the calibration. Not during the lecture, I didn't have to recalibrate during the lecture, but I, had to make sure, it was quite stressful making sure that things were all set up perfectly here. And that's partly to do with my setup. The environment that I made in Unity Game Engine, that was trivial for me, but it's not a trivial task for someone to just up and make a virtual environment in the Unity Game Engine, particularly one that's coded and suitable for VR. And final gotcha is, it's a classic with VR that I did feel quite ill by the 1 hour point in terms of motion sickness and that sort of thing. 2 hours is probably too long for this kind of content. And I'll just finish off with a bonus round, which is around Frame VR. Frame VR is a virtual collaborative environment that seems to be designed with educative experiences in mind. The team at Kale introduced this to me, and they're doing some pretty amazing stuff, so I'd encourage you to take a look at what they're doing with it. And some of the features that it includes are virtual screens, as you can see here, so I'm able to share my screen, share my webcam. My contribution is that I added Discord integration into it, that the students could still type in the lecture chat. I could still look behind me and read the chat. All the students started throwing balls at me at one point. They just sort of colluded and were like, let's do that. And at one point I looked behind me and a student was sitting inside the wall looking at my slides while also trying to remain hidden in the wall and not on the recording. I'll leave this to the experts around Frame VR and lectorials, but Frame VR could open itself up to this sort of thing, or is suitable for this sort of thing, possibly because it has not only that lecture environment that I showed on the previous slide, but you can have breakout spaces with props and people can chat and you hear the voices only of the people near you, that sort of thing. So it is plausible that lectorials could be suitable for this. Both of these things around mixed reality and Frame VR, I've tweeted about these, and I like to try and tweet threads about some of the teaching innovations that I'm trying out. So do give me a follow on Twitter. And yeah, I'll look forward to talking to you there. Thanks everyone. Bye.